But this whole thing seems to have to do with the New World Order.
A new world order. New world order. New world order.
According to the Financial Times, this is a headline: Russia and China's plans for a new world order. Again, it's an article you can share with friends, family who think that the idea of a new world order is crazy. No, Financial Times saying how Russia and China are planning for a new world order. For Moscow and Beijing, the Ukraine crisis is part of a struggle to reduce American power and make the world safe for autocrats.
Whee!
And it says here, the Western Alliance has threatened the Kremlin with massive and unprecedented sanctions if Russia attacks Ukraine. Actually, I think I have a Joe Biden clip to Putin.
We will hunt you down and make you pay.
Yeah, real scary. But as the Ukraine crisis reaches boiling point, Western efforts to isolate and punish Russia are likely to be undermined by the support of China, Russia's giant neighbor. So if China and Russia combine forces, U.S. is maybe outdone here. When Vladimir Putin travels to Beijing for the beginning of the Winter Olympics on February 4, the Russian president will meet with the leader who has become his most important ally, Xi Jinping of China. In a phone call between Putin and Xi in December, the Chinese leader supported Russia's demand that Ukraine must never join NATO. A decade ago, such a relationship seemed unlikely. China and Russia were as much rivals as partners. But after a period when both countries have sparred persistently with the U.S., Xi's support for Putin reflects a growing identity between the interests and worldviews of Moscow and Beijing. According to the Chinese media, Xi told Putin that, quote, certain international forces are arbitrarily interfering in the internal affairs of China and Russia under the guise of democracy and human rights. Ooh, those are pretty strong words.
The guys.
Yeah, pretty strong words against U.S. As Xi's remarks to Putin made clear, the Russian and Chinese leaders are united by a belief that the U.S. is plotting to undermine and overthrow their governments. In the heyday of communism, Russia and China supported revolutionary forces around the world, but today Moscow and Beijing have embraced the rhetoric of counter-revolution. When unrest broke out in Kazakhstan recently, Putin accused the U.S. of attempting to sponsor a, quote, color revolution, a term given to protest movements that seek to change the government in a country that borders both Russia and China. Senior Chinese ministers echoed those remarks. You know what the problem, part of the problem with this is that Beijing, Putin and Xi here, as much as they have egregious activity in, that their countries have done, the U.S. is just as bad. And when they mention bad stuff about the U.S., it's probably true, but it's true of the intelligence agency. But unfortunately for these geopolitical saber rattlings, the U.S. is represented by our intelligence and military. So it's like, great. But yeah, we've done horrible things too. And yeah, I guess they're using that as a point to come together. What's the phrase? Your enemy is, what was it? Your enemy is my enemy or something?
The enemy of your enemy is your friend.
The enemy of your enemy is your friend. Yeah.
Is my friend.
My friend. Whatever.
Your friend. Our
whatever.
friend.
Yes. We're all friends. As Russia and China see it, though, the uprising in Kazakhstan fitted a pattern. Fitted a pattern. The Kremlin has long argued that the U.S. was the hidden hand behind Ukraine's maiden uprising of 2013-14, in which a pro-Russian leader was overthrown. China also insists that foreign forces for which read the U.S. were behind the huge Hong Kong protests in 2019, which were eventually ended by a crackdown ordered from Beijing. Which, yes, that was pretty much the communist takeover of Hong Kong. Both Putin and Xi have also made clear they believe that America's ultimate goal is to overthrow the Russian and Chinese governments and that local pro-democracy forces are America's Trojan horse. See, that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, there could be some that think that, but for the most part, I don't think the U.S. in general are like, we must take over Russia and China. But I don't know. Maybe our intelligence agencies are.
Well, they
Maybe they're
certainly
playing that game.
want something. I mean, we know the establishment wants conflict. The whole
Yeah.
machine runs on conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, that is in the definition of, the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex does not work without constant conflict. And since we pulled out of the gold mine of conflict that was Afghanistan, they've just been itching ever since to get into another conflict because it's the source of economic, it's the fuel for the economic engine that is a military-industrial complex. And, we may have gotten out of Afghanistan, but the machine is still the machine, and it needs to be fed. And that's what we're seeing now. We pulled out of Afghanistan in August. And it's, what is that? So it's been 4 months since, maybe 5 months since the military-industrial complex has had the fuel that it's gotten so used to for 20 years. I mean, I'm pretty sure you could go back and listen to our episodes back in August, pulling out of Afghanistan. And the first thing we're talking about is, this is unfortunate because this means another conflict has to begin in order to keep the machine going. And when you have a Congress and a government as a whole that is economically incentivized to have the country in armed military conflict, surprise, surprise, you have forces and incentives and motivations at every level of the government to get us back into a conflict. Because there's billions of dollars, not just for, arms dealers, manufacturers, and distributors, as well as, private contractors, security contractors, mercenaries, things like that. But, even companies like aircraft companies who, the airline industry is suffering now, not selling a whole lot of planes. Well, what's the other option? Make military planes, it's really, when you talk about the military-industrial complex, it's not just gun makers who benefit from war. It's the politicians who own stakes in the gun makers or have lobbyists who are, paying some certain bills. You've got investments from the entire ruling elite class. And you've got corporations who are trying to recover from a government, imposed economic pullback with the justification of the pandemic, who need a little boost, need a little economic boost with no war and no, industry slowed. The only answer is an armed conflict to re-inject some economic movement within the system. And, with the inflation that we're facing, with the economic downturn, Dow lost 1,000 points, with all sorts of crazy stuff happening, the solution is an old medicine. It's an old medicine that we've seen applied over and over again to this country, and it's war. And the people at the top, the elite infrastructure, they know if they can get in an armed conflict, not only does it help hide economic wrongdoing and bad choices, but it also will help fuel not only their own portfolios, but will put fuel back into the machine and keep things running. They could print as much as they could print without destroying things. Now they need to destroy things so they don't have to print.
Yeah. Sorry. For some reason, while you were talking, you shrank to like Oompa Loompa size. I had to fix you.
I'm so little.
Let me read a couple more paragraphs here, and I think this summarizes the point here. Two features of the current world order that the Russians and the Chinese frequently object to are unipolarity and universality. Put more simply, they believe that the current arrangements give America too much power, and they are determined to change that. Quote, unipolarity means that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the world was left with only one superpower, the U.S. Fyodor Lukyanov, a Russian foreign policy thinker who is close to President Putin, believes that unipolarity, quote, gave the U.S. the ability and possibility to do whatever it saw fit on the world stage. He argues that the new age of American hegemony was ushered in by the Gulf War of 1991, in which the U.S. assembled a global coalition to drive Saddam Hussein's Iraq out of Kuwait. And it goes on with NATO, the 90s, all the stuff that happened in the Middle East, 9/11. It goes through everything. But this is interesting. For Russia and China to make its move right when the U.S. looks the weakest with this guy.
Armageddon's on the way.
Got hairy legs. Got hairy legs.
He's the president of the U.S. It feels like the perfect time for Russia and China. Like Biden said he'd bring people together, so he's doing it. He's brought Xi and Putin together to fight us.
Biden is such a great uniter. That's what he claimed. That's what he ran on.
I know he ran on.
Unite
bring
the country, unite our enemies, unite everybody.
He did it,
and he's really following through.
He's done it with this China-Russia alliance against the U.S. Biden's gonna have to pull some real magic tricks, to join the crew. Call up Putin and Xi there.
I think it's all part of the plan.
Come on, guys, let me in.
Come on, I'll start a war for you.
Yeah, I'll give you $1 billion. We gave Ukraine $1 billion for listening to us.
Yeah, just let my son sit on the board of the oil company again, okay? Please, guys.
All right.
Well, I think I've said all I have to say about the current situation. There was that really weird set of that news cycle last week where the mainstream media was talking about how Russia was pulling false flags or planned to pull false flags in Ukraine, which was really interesting to see the corporate media admit that false flags existed.
Yeah.
The very idea that false flags existed has been, conspiracy theory and wacko, debunked, baseless, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to getting Americans fired up to go to war with Russia, false flags, yeah, they happen all the time. Not us, we don't do it, but Russia does. They're bad.
Yeah, well, that's how propaganda works.